I, 42F, reconnected with my daughter, 24F, after giving her up for adoption, but now her fiancé, 26M, is causing problems. My life has been a roller coaster of emotions and experiences, and I feel like I need to share my story. I grew up in a small, conservative town in the Midwest. My parents were pillars of the local church community, my father was a deacon, and my mother led the women's ministry. From the outside, we looked like the perfect family, but behind closed doors, things were different. My parents were strict and overbearing, monitoring every aspect of my life. I wasn't allowed to date, wear makeup, or even listen to popular music. They had my entire life planned out. I would attend the local Christian college, marry a nice boy from church, and become a homemaker. But I had dreams of my own. I loved art and wanted to study it in college. I secretly applied to art schools, hoping for a scholarship that would allow me to escape my suffocating home life. When my parents found out, they were furious. They tore up my acceptance letters and grounded me indefinitely. In an act of rebellion, I snuck out to a party with some friends from school. That's where I met Harold, 18M. He was charming, older, and seemed to understand me in a way no one else did. We started dating in secret, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly seen and appreciated. One night, about 3 months into our relationship, Harold convinced me to sneak out to a bonfire party in the woods. There was alcohol, which I'd never had before. I got drunk for the first time, and Harold and I ended up having sex. It was my first time, and I was too naive to insist on protection. A few weeks later, I missed my period. I was terrified but managed to buy a pregnancy test without my parents knowing. When it came back positive, my world shattered. I told Harold, hoping he would support me, but he panicked. He accused me of trying to trap him, said the baby probably wasn't even his, and blocked my number. Just like that, he was gone. I was alone, scared, and pregnant at 17. I knew I couldn't hide it from my parents forever, so I gathered my courage and told them. Their reaction was even worse than I'd feared. My father called me a whore and said I had brought shame on the family. My mother cried and wailed about what the church community would think. They wanted me to have an abortion, despite it going against their religious beliefs, just to avoid the scandal. When I refused, they became cruel. They pulled me out of school, telling everyone I was being homeschooled. In reality, they kept me locked in the house, hidden away like a dirty secret. They constantly berated me, telling me I had ruined my life and theirs. My mother force-fed me herbs that she said would cleanse me, making me violently ill. My father quoted Bible verses about the sins of the flesh and made me pray for hours on my knees. As my pregnancy progressed, I sank into a deep depression. I felt utterly alone and hopeless. But then, something changed. I started to feel the baby move, and a fierce love and protectiveness washed over me. I knew I couldn't raise a child in this toxic environment, but I also knew I wanted this baby to have a chance at a good life. I started secretly researching adoption agencies, using the ancient desktop computer in our basement when my parents were asleep. That's how I found out about open adoption. The idea that I could give my baby a loving home while still maintaining some connection felt like a lifeline. I managed to contact an adoption agency without my parents knowing. They put me in touch with a couple, Sarah and Michael, who were looking to adopt. We started exchanging emails, and I was immediately struck by their kindness and understanding. They didn't judge me for my situation, they just wanted to provide a loving home for a child. When I went into labor, my parents reluctantly took me to the hospital. They didn't want to, but they were more afraid of the scandal if something went wrong with the home birth. Sarah and Michael were there, and their support got me through the grueling 18-hour labor. When my daughter was born, I held her for a few precious moments before handing her to her adoptive parents. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but I knew it was the right choice. After the adoption, I couldn't bear to stay with my parents any longer. The day I was released from the hospital, I packed a bag and left. I had saved up some money from babysitting jobs over the years, which was enough to buy a bus ticket to the nearest big city. Those first few years on my own were incredibly tough. I worked multiple minimum wage jobs just to afford a tiny studio apartment. I got my GED and started taking community college classes at night. It was exhausting, but the thought of building a better life for myself kept me going. I threw myself into my studies and eventually earned a scholarship to finish my degree at a state university. I majored in marketing, figuring it was a practical way to apply my creative skills. After graduation, I landed an entry-level job at a small advertising agency. Over the years, I worked my way up in the industry. There were setbacks and challenges, but I was determined to succeed. Now, at 42, I'm a senior marketing executive at a large firm. I have a comfortable life, but it's been lonely. The trauma from my teen years made it hard for me to trust people, especially men. I've had a few short-term relationships, but nothing lasting. Throughout it all, I thought about the daughter I had given up. Sarah and Michael sent me updates and photos every year as we had agreed. I treasured each one, watching from afar as my little girl grew into a young woman. I left a letter for her with the adoption agency, to be given to her on her 18th birthday if she wanted it. It explained the circumstances of her adoption and left the door open for contact if she ever wanted it. Her 18th birthday came and went with no word. I tried not to take it personally. I knew she might need more time or simply not be interested in connecting. Still, it hurt. Then, about 2 years ago, I got an email that changed everything. It was from my daughter, Eleanor, 24F. She explained that her adoptive parents had given her my letter on her 18th birthday, but she hadn't felt ready to reach out until now. She said she'd like to meet if I was open to it. I was overjoyed but also terrified. What if she hated me? What if we had nothing in common? Despite my fears, I agreed to meet her for coffee. That first meeting was awkward but went better than I could have hoped. Eleanor was smart, kind, and understanding about the circumstances of her adoption. We started slowly, meeting every few weeks to get to know each other. Over time, we developed a close relationship. I even got to know Sarah and Michael, who turned out to be wonderful people. They had raised Eleanor with love and had always been open with her about her adoption. Eleanor works as an elementary school teacher and has a passion for art, a trait I like to think she inherited from me. She's talented and creative in ways that amaze me. Reconnecting with her filled a hole in my life I didn't even realize was there. For the first time, I felt like I had a real family. About 6 months ago, Eleanor told me she had started dating someone new, a guy named Derek, 26M, who she met through mutual friends. I was happy for her, but something about Derek rubbed me the wrong way from the start. He seemed controlling and possessive, always hovering around Eleanor when we spent time together. I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt at first. I told myself I was just being overprotective because I'd missed out on so much of Eleanor's life. But as time went on, Derek's behavior became more concerning. He constantly put down Eleanor's career choice, saying teaching was a waste of her potential and that she should find a higher-paying job. He criticized her artwork and discouraged her from pursuing it as anything more than a hobby. Whenever Eleanor and I made plans together, Derek would find a way to tag along uninvited. The real red flag came when Eleanor mentioned she was thinking of going back to school for her master's degree. Derek immediately shot down the idea, saying it was too expensive and that Eleanor didn't need more education. He told her she should focus on more important things, which I took to mean marriage and children. I wanted to say something to Eleanor about my concerns, but I worried it would damage our still new relationship. I didn't want her to think I was trying to control her life after being absent for so long. Then last month, Eleanor called me excitedly to announce that she and Derek were engaged. They'd only been dating for about 4 months at this point. I tried my best to sound happy for her, but inside I was panicking. A week after the engagement, Eleanor asked if we could meet for lunch. She seemed nervous and upset. Once we sat down, she confided that Derek had been pressuring her to quit her teaching job once they got married. He wanted her to be a stay-at-home wife and eventually mother. Eleanor said she loved teaching and wasn't ready to give up her career, but Derek insisted it was for the best. I couldn't stay silent any longer. I gently shared my concerns about Derek's controlling behavior and how quickly the relationship was moving. I told Eleanor that a good partner should support her dreams and ambitions, not try to stifle them. Eleanor got very quiet and then started crying. She admitted she'd been having doubts about the engagement but felt trapped. Derek had isolated her from many of her friends, saying they were bad influences. He monitored her phone and social media. She was afraid of how he might react if she tried to leave. I hugged Eleanor and assured her that she wasn't alone. I offered to help her in any way I could, whether that meant a place to stay, financial support, or just a listening ear. She seemed relieved to have finally opened up about the situation. We spent the next few hours making a plan for Eleanor to safely leave Derek. She decided to stay with Sarah and Michael for a while until she could find a new apartment. I helped her pack up her belongings while Derek was at work and drove her to her parents' house. It's been a difficult and emotional time, but I'm so proud of Eleanor for having the strength to leave that toxic relationship. Our bond has grown even stronger through this experience. I'm grateful that I was able to be there for her when she needed support. I know we still have a long road ahead as Eleanor heals and rebuilds her life. But I'll be by her side every step of the way. After missing out on so much of her life, I'm determined to make up for lost time and be the mother she deserves. Update 1. It's been about 2 months since Eleanor left Derek, and I wanted to give an update on how things are going. The first few weeks were really tough. Derek didn't take the breakup well at all. He bombarded Eleanor with calls and texts, alternating between begging her to come back and making angry threats. We had to block his number and all social media accounts. Derek also started showing up at Eleanor's school, trying to corner her in the parking lot. Thankfully, the principal was understanding of the situation and arranged for a security guard to escort Eleanor to and from her car. We also filed for a restraining order, which was granted pretty quickly given Derek's erratic behavior. Eleanor has been staying with Sarah and Michael, which has been good for her. They've been incredibly supportive throughout this whole ordeal. She's also been seeing a counselor to work through the emotional trauma from the relationship. I can already see a positive change in her. She seems more confident and relaxed. One unexpected development is that Eleanor's passion for art has reignited. Without Derek's constant criticism, she's rediscovered her love of painting. She's even talking about maybe trying to sell some of her work or do commissions on the side. I've been spending a lot of time with Eleanor, helping her apartment hunt and just being there to talk. Our relationship has grown so much closer through all of this. She's opened up to me about her fears and insecurities in a way she never had before. I feel honored that she trusts me enough to be vulnerable. There was one scary incident about a month ago. Eleanor and I were having dinner at a restaurant when Derek showed up, clearly drunk. He started yelling and making a scene, accusing me of stealing Eleanor from him. The restaurant staff called the police and Derek was arrested for violating the restraining order. It shook Eleanor up pretty badly, but she handled it with amazing strength. On a more positive note, Eleanor has reconnected with several friends she'd lost touch with during her relationship with Derek. It turns out he had been actively working to isolate her, telling her that her friends were jealous of their relationship or bad influences. Her friends have been wonderfully supportive, and it's been great to see Eleanor laughing and enjoying herself with them. Eleanor has also thrown herself back into her teaching career with renewed enthusiasm. She's taking on some extra responsibilities at school and her principal has hinted that a promotion to lead teacher might be in her future. Seeing her eyes light up when she talks about her students just reinforces how wrong Derek was to try to make her quit. As for me, this whole experience has made me realize how much I'd been holding myself back from forming close relationships. Reconnecting with Eleanor and being there for her through this difficult time has opened my heart in ways I never expected. I've even started cautiously dipping my toes into the dating pool, nothing serious yet, but it feels good to be open to the possibility of companionship. I've also been doing a lot of reflection on my own past and how it shaped my life. I realized that I never really dealt with the trauma from my teenage years, I just buried it and focused on building my career. Seeing Eleanor work through her issues in therapy has inspired me to do the same. I've started seeing a therapist of my own, and it's been challenging but incredibly helpful. One thing that's come up in therapy is my relationship with my parents. I hadn't spoken to them since the day I left home at 17. Part of me had always wondered if they ever regretted how they treated me, but I was too afraid to reach out. With my therapist's encouragement, I decided to write them a letter. I didn't expect a response, but I felt it was important for my own healing to express my feelings. To my surprise, I received a letter back from my mother a few weeks later. She expressed deep remorse for how they had treated me and said they had spent years regretting their actions. She said they had tried to find me several times over the years but hadn't been successful. She asked if we could meet to talk. I'm still processing how I feel about this. Part of me wants to reconnect and heal those old wounds, but another part is still angry and hurt. I haven't decided yet if I'm ready to see them, but I'm discussing it with my therapist and Eleanor. Through all of this, Eleanor has been my rock. She's been so understanding and supportive as I work through my own issues. Our roles have reversed in a way, now she's the one comforting and advising me. It's created a beautiful balance in our relationship. Eleanor is still living with Sarah and Michael but has started looking for her own apartment. She's talking about maybe getting a studio space where she can work on her art. I've offered to help her financially if she needs it, but she's determined to do it on her own. I'm so proud of her independence and strength. Overall, while the past couple of months have been challenging, I'm feeling optimistic about the future. Eleanor is healing and rediscovering herself, and our mother-daughter bond grows stronger every day. I'm just so grateful that I've had the opportunity to be there for her and to experience the joy of having her in my life. Update 2. It's been about 6 months since my last update, and a lot has happened. I wish I could say everything has been smooth sailing, but we've had some unexpected challenges. The good news first, Eleanor is doing really well overall. She found a great apartment and has settled into her new independent life. Her art has taken off in a big way. She's started an Etsy shop selling prints of her paintings and it's been more successful than she ever imagined. She's even talking about eventually transitioning to art full-time if things continue to go well. Eleanor also got that promotion at school to lead teacher. She's thriving in the new role and her students adore her. Seeing her confidence grow and watching her pursue her passions has been incredibly rewarding. Our relationship continues to strengthen. We have a standing weekly dinner date and talk or text almost every day. Eleanor has started calling me mom, which never fails to make my heart swell. I feel so lucky to have this second chance at being her mother. Now for the not-so-good news. About 2 months ago, Derek resurfaced. Apparently, he'd been in rehab for alcohol abuse. He reached out to Eleanor saying he was sober now, had been going to therapy, and wanted to apologize for his past behavior. Eleanor was understandably wary, but also conflicted. Part of her wanted to believe Derek had really changed. Against my better judgment, she agreed to meet him in a public place to hear him out. To my surprise, Derek actually seemed sincere. He took full responsibility for his abusive behavior and didn't try to make excuses. He said he understood if Eleanor never wanted to see him again, but hoped they could eventually be on friendly terms. Eleanor came away from the meeting feeling confused. She said she could tell Derek had done a lot of work on himself, but she wasn't sure if she could ever trust him again. She asked for my advice, which put me in a tough position. On one hand, I was proud of Eleanor for being open to forgiveness and seeing the potential for people to change. On the other hand, I was terrified that Derek might worm his way back into her life and hurt her again. I tried my best to be objective. I told Eleanor that while it was good that Derek was getting help, she didn't owe him anything. I suggested that if she wanted to cautiously rebuild a friendship, she should do it on her own terms and with very clear boundaries. For a while, things seemed okay. Eleanor and Derek had occasional, brief interactions, mostly just exchanging polite texts. But then Derek started pushing for more. He wanted to get coffee, to come see Eleanor's new apartment, to meet up with her and her friends. Eleanor tried to maintain boundaries, but I could see her resolve weakening. She started making excuses for Derek's pushy behavior, saying he was just excited to reconnect. I gently reminded her of how things had been before, but I could tell she didn't want to hear it. Things came to a head last week. Eleanor called me in tears, saying she and Derek had gotten into a huge fight. Apparently, he'd shown up at her apartment unannounced and gotten angry when she wouldn't let him in. He accused her of leading him on and said some pretty nasty things. The whole incident was a wake-up call for Eleanor. She realized that despite his claims of change, Derek was still trying to control and manipulate her. She blocked his number again, and we're in the process of renewing the restraining order. Eleanor is pretty shaken up, but I think in a way she's relieved to have confirmation that ending things with Derek was the right choice. She's been spending a lot of time at my place, not wanting to be alone in her apartment. I'm more than happy to have her here and provide whatever support she needs. On a personal note, I've made some progress with my own family situation. After much consideration and discussion with my therapist, I decided to meet with my parents. We met at a neutral location, a quiet cafe in a neighboring town. It was an emotional and difficult meeting. My parents apologized profusely for how they treated me as a teenager. They explained that after I left, they did a lot of soul-searching and eventually left their church, realizing how toxic and controlling it had been. They've spent years in therapy themselves, working through their own issues and trying to understand where they went wrong with me. While I appreciate their apology and the work they've done on themselves, I'm not ready to fully let them back into my life. There's still a lot of hurt and mistrust to work through. We've agreed to take things slow, occasional phone calls and maybe meeting up every few months. I told them about Eleanor, which was a bittersweet moment. They were thrilled to learn they have a granddaughter but devastated to realize how much they've missed out on. I'm not ready for them to meet Eleanor yet, but I've left that door open for the future if everyone feels comfortable with it. This experience has reinforced for both Eleanor and me the importance of trusting our instincts and maintaining strong boundaries. While it's been a difficult few weeks, I'm confident that we'll come through this stronger than ever. And we'll do it together, supporting each other every step of the way. Update 3. It's been about a year since my last update, and I'm happy to report that things have finally settled into a much more positive rhythm for Eleanor and me. After the incident with Derek showing up at her apartment, Eleanor decided she needed a fresh start. She found a job opportunity teaching art at a school in a city about 2 hours away. It was a big step, but she felt it was necessary to truly move on from the toxic situation with Derek. I was sad to see her move further away, but I completely understood and supported her decision. We made a plan to visit each other at least twice a month, and we still talk on the phone almost every day. Eleanor has absolutely flourished in her new environment. She loves her job teaching art and has really connected with her students. Her own art career has taken off as well. She had her first gallery showing a few months ago and sold several pieces. Seeing her beaming with pride as she showed me around the gallery was one of the happiest moments of my life. As for me, I've made some big changes too. Eleanor's courage in starting fresh inspired me to shake things up in my own life. I'd been feeling stuck in my marketing job for a while, so I decided to take early retirement and pursue some passions I'd been putting off. I've started volunteering at a local women's shelter, helping women who are leaving abusive relationships. My experience supporting Eleanor through her situation with Derek made me realize I had a lot to offer in this area. It's been incredibly rewarding work. I've also started taking art classes, partly to have something to share with Eleanor, but I've discovered I really enjoy it for its own sake. I'm not nearly as talented as she is, but it's fun and relaxing. Eleanor gets a kick out of critiquing my amateur efforts. My relationship with my parents has continued to slowly improve. We've had a few more meetings and regular phone calls. While we'll never have the close relationship we might have had without our painful history, we've reached a place of understanding and forgiveness. They've even met Eleanor a couple of times, which went better than I expected. Eleanor came to visit last weekend and we had a wonderful time. We went to an art museum, cooked dinner together, and stayed up late just talking and laughing. At one point, she got quiet and a bit teary-eyed. She told me how grateful she was that we had reconnected and that I had been there for her through everything with Derek. She said that for years she had wondered about her birth mother and why I had given her up. But now she understood the complexity of the situation and was thankful that I had made the difficult choice to give her a better life than I could have provided at the time. She told me she was proud to be my daughter. I'm not ashamed to admit I broke down crying at that point. To hear those words from her, after all the years of guilt and regret, was more healing than I can express. We hugged for a long time, both of us teary but smiling. As Eleanor was leaving to head back to her city, she surprised me by saying she's considering looking for teaching jobs back in this area. She said she misses being close to me and wants us to be able to spend more time together. Nothing is decided yet, but just the fact that she's thinking about it means the world to me. Looking back on the past few years, reconnecting with Eleanor, helping her through the situation with Derek, and building our relationship, I'm filled with a sense of gratitude and joy I never thought possible. Our journey hasn't been easy, but it's brought us to a place of deep love and understanding. Whatever the future holds, I know we'll face it together.